Welcome back to part 2 of this tutorial on the other side video effect that Honda used. So in this video we're going to try clean up our JavaScript and modularize it a bit. So this is the JavaScript that we had from the previous video, and we're going to take this and we're going to try modularize it. So the way we're going to modularize it is we're going to put everything into an object which is going to hold our entire app. So we're going to create an object, we're going to call it other side, and then some curly braces to signify it's an object. And then inside this object we're going to have some functions, or methods as they're called, inside objects that are going to do the various things we need. So we're going to start out with an init function, which is just going to be what we call from outside of our object to start out the app. So we'll call it from out here otherside.init. So now when the page loads, it's going to load our object, and then it's going to call the init function of our object. So we're not going to put anything in there just yet, we will later on. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to write a cache DOM method. Function. So like I mentioned in the previous video, having to always make these jQuery selector calls is inefficient, because every time we make one, jQuery searches the entire DOM. Now if you've got a really big application, that can be a very inefficient way of using your application if it has to constantly be searching the DOM. So what you want to do is search the DOM for everything you want once, and then just cache everything, store it in memory. So you don't need to search the DOM again, you've got it on hand. So to do that, we're going to put everything into variables. So when you're in an object, you need to start everything with this, which is just saying find this method or variable within the context that we're in currently, which is in this case the other side object. So this is exactly the same as saying other side object dot something, but because we're inside the other side object we use the word this. So we're going to start off with this dot, and then we're going to start the variable name with a $, just to signify to ourselves that this is a jQuery selector and not any other random variable. And we're going to call this default container. Actually, we'll camel case it. Default container. And then that's going to equal this jQuery selector here. So we'll copy that and put that there. And then we'll create this expose container. We're going to set that equal to expose container here. So now what else do we need to cache? So we've cached this and this, this and this. Now we also have to find video, so we might as well cache that as well. So we'll copy all of, actually we won't do that because we've already got default container cached, so there's no point searching the DOM for that again. So we'll just say this dot default vid equals, and we'll set that equal to this dot default container, which we've already cached, dot find, and then find the video. And then we'll do the same for exposed video. So we'll call this expose vid. We'll set that equal to this dot expose container dot find, and find the video. So what else do we need? So we also do a DOM search for video and a DOM search for document. So we'll create two more variables, this dot vid, and we'll set that equal to a jQuery call for video, and we'll create this dot doc, and inside that we'll just cache the document. So now we've got everything cached. We only have to search the DOM for all of this once, and then it's all in variables. So that's 6 DOM calls, where in this code we had to make 3 DOM calls on a key down and 3 on a key up. So we had to make 6 per key press, where now our app only has to make 6 in total. So already we're far more efficient. So now that we've got everything cached, we need to actually bind the key down, the key up, the play, and the pause event listeners. So we'll create another method. We'll call this method bind events, and this is also a function. And then in here we're going to say this dot doc dot on key down, and then when the key down happens, we're going to call a method that we haven't made yet, and we're going to call it key down func for key down function. And then so this line here is exactly the same as this line here, except now we're not making a DOM call, we're using a variable on key down, and instead of writing the function itself within the callback, we're just calling another function. So this is keeping everything modular. We don't have this function inside of the on method to sort of make things more confusing. We're just calling another method, so everything is a lot easier to read and it's more modular. So we'll just continue and write the key up. So on key up, we want to run this dot key up function. Again, we'll create that, and then we need the video on play and video on pause. So we cached video, so we can call this dot vid on play, and then our callback will call this dot play vid, and then here we'll say this dot vid again dot on, this time on pause, and we'll call this dot pause vid. So now we've bound all of the events. We're listening for key up, we're listening for key down, play, and pause. So that's the equivalent of all of these. So now we need to create each of these functions here, and we will do that now. So we'll create key down function. We'll make that a function. So our key down function here. So here we had to pass it an argument of event. So again, we'll do the same here. We'll give it an argument. And then in here we want the same if statement. So if event dot key code equals 82, we want to run some code. The code we want to run, we want to call the default container. So we've got that up here. So we'll call default container dot CSS, and we're changing the CSS top property, and we will change that to minus 2000 pixels again. So we've got that, and then we want to change the muted property. So we've got default container dot find video, change the muted property. So we've already got default container find video here, saved as default vid. So we'll take that and say dot prop muted equals true. And then we'll do the same for the exposed vid dot prop muted, and this time we want it to be false. So that is our key down function. Now we can just copy all of this and create our key up method. So we've got that. We want to change this to 0 pixels and swap these round. So we want that to be false. We want this to be true. And now we can create the play. So within our play function we had a for loop. So we'll do the same here. So we'll call this play vid like we referenced earlier. Make it a function, and then in the function we'll give it a for I equals 0, I is less than 2, I plus plus. And then in here we want to find this dot vid dot get I dot play. So that's exactly the same as the line here, except instead of making a DOM call we're using a cached variable. And then we will copy this to create the pause vid. Pause, and we'll make that a pause. So now going back to here, the only other functionality we need to implement is this line here. So we'll make another method. We'll call this setVolume, and that'll be a function. And inside here we want to find this dot vid. Then we find a property in there, the property's volume, and we want to change it to 0.2. So that's that. So now we can go back and change the init function to call the methods that we want to call. So we need to start off, we want to call this dot cache DOM. So as soon as the app loads, we want to cache the DOM, so we don't have to make any more calls to the DOM. Then we can call this dot bind events. So we bind all of our event listeners, and then we'll just set the volume to whatever. We could, of course, give this an argument so that we can actually change the volume that we want, but in this case we'll just leave it at 0.2. So now, as soon as this app loads, as soon as the JavaScript loads, it's going to call other side init. Then the init method is going to call all of these other methods. Then it's going to cache the DOM, it's going to bind the events, and it's going to set the volume. And then the bind events is listening to the key up, key down, play, and pause, and it will call each of these respective methods whenever required. So there's one more thing that we need to cover for this to work, and that's something called context, and specifically the change of context when using the on method. So context is what the value of this keyword, whatever the value of the this keyword is at any given point in your program, is the context at that point in your program. So as we discussed, this is basically a keyword that means our other side object for the most part. So this.cacheDOM is the same as calling other side.cacheDOM, because other side object is our context. And that's true of most of the this keywords used within this object. Where things change though is when you use the on method. So we're calling this.doc, so that's other side.doc, so we're calling this variable, the cache document, .on keydown, then we're calling this.keydown function, which is other side.keydown function, which is this. So everything's fine. but then on changes the context of the key down function. So when we reference this inside the key down function, this no longer equals other side object. So when we call this .default container, we're not calling other side .default container like we want, but instead this has changed to whatever the on method was listening to. So on, so it's document.on. So now when we call key down function, the on was listening to the document, so the context or the value of this within the key down function now equals the document. So when we call inside the key down function this.default container, what we're actually calling is document.defaultContainer.css. But the document does not have a variable called default container. So when we try to call the CSS method on the default container within the document, it's going to say it's undefined because it doesn't exist. So if we go into our, we've just checking that we're referencing the correct JavaScript. So if we go into our browser, refresh the page, and open up the console, see straight away it says can't read property find of undefined. And then if I try press R, nothing's going to happen. So coming back to our JavaScript, yes, we need to change this as well. I don't have the dollar signs. Was just wondering why it was saying the find was undefined, because it shouldn't be. So we just forgot the dollar sign there. So we'll save this again and we'll come back, refresh. See, now if we try to press the R, it says cannot read property CSS of undefined. So that's every time we press R, it's telling us that the CSS is undefined, or what we're trying to read the CSS of is undefined. And that's, like I said, because it's trying to read document.defaultContainer.css instead of otherside.defaultContainer.css. So if we actually write a console log here just to illustrate, and I say the value of this is plus this, so now we're console logging. When we press the R key, we're console logging the value of this. So like I said up here, the key down function is being called by on when it's listening to the document, so the value of this will be the document. So if we come back to our browser, refresh, and I press the R key, the value of this is object HTML document. So that's just like I said, it's the value of this has changed because we use the on method, and the on method changes the context. So to fix this, because obviously we want the value of this to still equal other side, because the default container lives within the other side object, so we want this to equal the other side object. So we will do that by binding the value of this that we want to that function. So jQuery has a method called bind that takes one argument, and that argument is the value of this that we want. So we'll just put this in there, and what this will do is take what the current value of this is in the current context, which is bind events. So within the bind events method, the value of this is other side, because we're still referencing this here, so we're saying this.document, which is other side.document. So when we're in the bind events method, this is still equal to other side. So now when we say bind this, we're binding other side as the context to this function, rather than letting it take the context given to it by the on method. So now if we save this and go back to our browser, refresh, And now if I press the R key, the value of this is object. So it's no longer HTML document. And the only other object that doesn't have a defined name is our other side object. So by using this .bind this, we've actually bound other side object to the value of this inside this function, which is what we want. So if we just copy this and put it into all of these, because we want to bind on all of these as well. So now if we save, come back to our browser, refresh. Now if we press R, the value of this is object, and if we play and then press R, we get the functionality that we want. Release. Perfect. And now that we've bound this value to those functions, we're getting the correct functionality. So this is the modular implementation of our previous code. So there's more lines of code here. There's 51 versus 33. But if another developer came into this project and took a look at this code, it's a lot easier to see what's going on at one glance. It's easy to see that all of this code initializes the app, all of this caches the DOM, all of this binds all the events. That's what happens on a key down, that's what happens on a key up. That plays the video, that pauses the videos, that sets the volume. It's easy to see. Where here, it's just a mess. It's not easy to see. You'd have to read it line by line to figure out what was going on. And then also, it's caching everything and only making a small amount of DOM calls. So it's more efficient use of the code. So if you want to get into JavaScript more seriously, you definitely want to get used to modularizing like this. If you start using any frameworks like Backbone or Angular, then you're definitely going to have to be writing JavaScript in this sort of fashion. So definitely something that you should look into. But for now, that's the end of this video and this series. I thank you for watching. I hope you understood everything that I've said. If you don't, just leave me a comment down below and I will get back to you. And until my next tutorials, I'll see you later.